Ethan Carter had always been a quiet young man. At just 22 years old, he carried the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, like someone much older. His life wasn't glamorous or exciting. It was simple, predictable, and often lonely. But Ethan didn't mind too much. He had learned early on that life wasn't about chasing dreams. It was about surviving, about making sure the people you loved were taken care of. That's why Ethan took the job at the Dawson estate. It wasn't because he enjoyed taking care of others, though he did have a kind heart, or because he liked working in such a big, fancy house. No, Ethan took the job because it paid well, and every penny mattered. His younger sister, Lily, was still in high school, and she needed support. Their parents were gone, leaving behind nothing but memories and unpaid bills. So Ethan worked hard, even if the work itself felt strange sometimes. The person Ethan cared for was Henry Dawson, a wealthy man who had slipped into a coma nearly 2 years ago after a car accident. The doctors said Henry might never wake up, but his family refused to give up hope, or maybe they just didn't want to deal with the reality of losing him. Either way, Ethan became part of the team that looked after Henry while he lay unconscious in his bed. Day after endless day, Henry lived in a sprawling mansion tucked away in the hills outside Seattle. It was surrounded by tall trees and winding roads, far from the noise and chaos of the city. Inside, the house was filled with expensive furniture, shiny marble floors, and artwork that probably cost more than Ethan would earn in 10 lifetimes. But none of that mattered to Ethan. What mattered was doing his job right. Every morning, Ethan would arrive at the mansion just as the sun began to rise. He'd check on Henry first thing, making sure the machines monitoring his vitals were working properly. Then came the routine tasks: cleaning the room, changing the sheets, adjusting the feeding tube, and giving Henry sponge baths. It wasn't glamorous work, but Ethan approached it with care and respect. After all, this was another human being, even if he couldn't respond. Most days, the house was eerily silent. The only sounds were the soft hum of medical equipment and the occasional footsteps of other staff members coming and going. Sometimes Grace Dawson, Henry's daughter, would visit, though her appearances grew less frequent over time. She was polite enough when she spoke to Ethan, but there was a distance in her eyes, as if she already believed her father was lost to her forever. One afternoon, Grace stopped Ethan in the hallway. "Do you think he'll ever wake up?" she asked, her voice tinged with both hope and resignation. Ethan hesitated before answering. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I try to treat him like he will." Grace nodded, not entirely satisfied with the answer, but grateful nonetheless. "You're good at your job," she added before walking away. Her words lingered in Ethan's mind long after she left. Despite the monotony of his days, Ethan found himself growing fond of Henry. There was something peaceful about the man, lying there motionless, untouched by the worries and stresses of the world. Ethan often wondered what kind of person Henry had been before the accident. Had he been kind, stern, funny, lonely? The questions swirled in Ethan's head, but he knew he'd probably never get answers. Then, one evening, something changed. It was late, and Ethan was finishing up his shift. He had already completed most of his tasks for the day, except for one last thing: bathing Henry. As he carefully cleaned Henry's arms and legs, he noticed something odd: a faint twitch. At first, Ethan thought it was just a muscle spasm, something he'd seen before in patients who were comatose. But then it happened again, a slight movement in Henry's fingers. Ethan froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He leaned closer, watching intently. For a moment, nothing happened. Just as he started to convince himself it was his imagination, Henry's eyelids fluttered. Not once, but twice. "Mr. Dawson?" Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. He reached out instinctively, placing a hand on Henry's shoulder. "Can you hear me?" There was no response, but Ethan couldn't ignore what he had just witnessed. He quickly grabbed the call button and alerted Dr. Bennett, the physician overseeing Henry's care. Within minutes, the doctor arrived, accompanied by a nurse. Together, they examined Henry, running tests and checking the monitors. Dr. Bennett frowned as he reviewed the results. "This is unusual," he muttered under his breath. "His brain activity has increased slightly. We'll need to monitor him closely." Ethan stood nearby, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. Could it be possible? Was Henry finally waking up after all this time? The thought sent a surge of hope through Ethan's body, but he tried to remain cautious. He had seen too many false alarms to let himself get carried away. Still, that night, as Ethan drove home, he couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen. Something inside him told him that this was different, that Henry wasn't just dreaming or reacting randomly. This was real. And if Henry woke up, everything might change. For the first time since starting the job, Ethan allowed himself to imagine a different future. Maybe Henry would recover fully. Maybe he'd remember who he was and reconnect with his family. Or maybe, just maybe, Ethan would play a small role in bringing him back to life. As he pulled into the driveway of the tiny apartment he shared with Lily, Ethan smiled to himself. Tomorrow was a new day, and for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful. The next morning, Ethan woke up earlier than usual. He couldn't shake the memory of what had happened the night before, those faint movements, the fluttering eyelids. It felt like a spark of hope had been lit inside him, and he wanted to see. If it was still glowing. When he arrived at the Dawson estate, the house seemed quieter than ever. The air carried a strange tension, as though everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Ethan went straight to Henry's room, his footsteps soft against the marble floor. As he pushed open the door, his eyes immediately landed on Henry. Henry looked the same as always, still, peaceful, unchanging. But there was something different in the atmosphere. Ethan wasn't sure if it was real or just in his head. He approached the bed cautiously, glancing at the monitors that tracked Henry's vital signs. Everything appeared normal, but Ethan couldn't help feeling that something was about to shift. He started his routine, checking the 4 lines and adjusting the blankets around Henry's body. As he worked, he spoke softly, even though he knew Henry probably couldn't hear him. "Good morning, Mr. Dawson," he said. "I'm here again today. I hope you're doing okay." Ethan paused, staring at Henry's face. For a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of movement, a twitch in the corner of Henry's mouth. He leaned closer, his heart pounding. "Mr. Dawson?" he whispered. "Can you hear me?" Suddenly, Henry's fingers moved. Not a spasm this time, but a deliberate, slow curling of his hand. Ethan gasped, stepping back in shock. Then, almost imperceptibly, Henry's eyelids began to flutter. They opened halfway, revealing cloudy, unfocused eyes. "Mr. Dawson!" Ethan exclaimed, his voice trembling with excitement. He pressed the call button for Dr. Bennett, his hands shaking. "He's waking up! He's waking up!" Within minutes, Dr. Bennett and a team of nurses rushed into the room. They surrounded Henry's bed, examining him carefully. Ethan stood to the side, watching anxiously as they ran tests and checked the machines. His mind raced with questions. Was this really happening? Would Henry recover? What would he remember? Dr. Bennett turned to Ethan after a while. "His brain activity is increasing," the doctor said, his tone cautious but hopeful. "It's too early to tell how much he'll regain, but this is promising." Ethan nodded, trying to process the news. He glanced at Henry, who was now lying. Still again, his eyes closed. Had it all been a fluke? Or was Henry truly coming back to life? Over the next few days, small changes began to appear. Henry's eyes would open occasionally, though they remained unfocused. Sometimes he made faint groans, or murmurs that didn't form words. Each tiny sign gave Ethan hope, but it was frustratingly slow progress. Grace Dawson visited. More frequently now, her curiosity piqued by the developments. She sat by her father's bedside, talking to him in hushed tones. "Dad, can you hear me?" she asked one day, her voice thick with emotion. "It's Grace, your daughter." Henry didn't respond, but Ethan noticed his fingers twitch slightly whenever Grace spoke. It was as if he recognized her voice. Even if he couldn't show it. One evening, Ethan stayed late to finish some paperwork. He lingered in Henry's room, tidying up and making sure everything was in order. As he adjusted the pillows behind Henry's head, he heard a weak, raspy groan. Startled, Ethan turned to see Henry's lips moving. "Where am I?" Henry croaked, his voice barely audible. Ethan froze, unsure whether to answer or call for help. Finally, he leaned closer, speaking gently. "You're safe, Mr. Dawson. You're at your home. My name is Ethan. I've been taking care of you." Henry blinked slowly, his gaze wandering around the room. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice hoarse and uncertain. "I'm Ethan," he repeated. "I've been helping you while you were asleep." Henry frowned, confusion etched across his face. "Asleep? For how long?" "Almost 2 years," Ethan replied. Softly, Henry's eyes widened, and he let out a shaky breath. 2 years, he muttered, as if trying to grasp the concept. "What happened?" "You were in an accident," Ethan explained. "But you're getting better now. That's what matters." Dr. Bennett arrived shortly after, alerted by Ethan's call. He conducted a thorough examination, asking Henry questions to assess his mental state. To everyone's surprise, Henry answered most of them coherently, though his responses were vague and fragmented. He remembered being wealthy, owning businesses, and having a family, but the details were blurry. Names, dates, and specific events eluded him. "He seems remarkably lucid for someone who has been in a coma for so long," Dr. Bennett remarked later, speaking to Ethan in private. "This level of recovery is extraordinary." Ethan nodded, still processing everything. "Do you think he'll get his memory back completely?" "It's hard to say," the doctor admitted. "Some patients regain full function over time, while others live with gaps in their memories. We'll have to wait and see." As the days passed, Henry continued to improve. He regained some strength in his limbs and could sit up with assistance. His speech became clearer, though he still struggled with certain words. Ethan spent hours by his side, helping him practice simple tasks like holding a cup or turning pages in a book. Henry often thanked him, his gratitude genuine despite his limited ability to express it. Despite the progress, there was something odd about Henry. He rarely asked about his past or his family. Instead, he seemed more interested in Ethan's life. One afternoon, as Ethan helped him eat lunch, Henry suddenly asked, "Tell me about yourself." "Ethan, who are you outside of this room?" Caught off guard, Ethan hesitated. "There's not much to tell," he said with a shrug. "I take care of people. I look after my sister, Lily. That's pretty much it." Henry studied him intently, his expression thoughtful. "You seem like a good person," he said after a moment. "Someone who cares deeply." Ethan chuckled nervously. "I'm just doing my job." "No," Henry insisted. "It's more than that. I can feel it." The comment caught Ethan off guard. He wasn't used to receiving compliments, especially from someone like Henry. Wealthy, powerful men weren't supposed to notice people like him, or so Ethan had always believed. Yet here was Henry, looking at him with clear, curious eyes, as if seeing something valuable in him. Grace noticed the growing bond between Ethan and her father, and it made her uneasy. One evening, she confronted Ethan in the hallway outside Henry's room. "What's going on between you and my dad?" she demanded, her arms crossed. Ethan blinked in surprise. "Nothing," he replied. "I'm just helping him recover." Grace narrowed her eyes. "You spend an awful lot of time with him. Are you trying to take advantage of him? Use his condition for your own gain?" The accusation stung. Ethan took a step back, hurt flashing across his face. "That's not fair," he said firmly. "I care about your father. I want him to get better." Grace softened slightly, though suspicion lingered in her gaze. "I'm sorry," she said after a pause. "I'm just protective of him. I don't want anyone hurting him." "I understand," Ethan replied quietly. "But I promise you, I'm not here to hurt him." Grace nodded, though she didn't look entirely convinced. She walked away, leaving Ethan standing alone in the hallway. He sighed, rubbing his temples. He hadn't expected this kind of scrutiny, but he supposed it came with the territory. After all, he was just a caregiver and nobody compared to the Dawson's world of wealth and privilege. Later that night, Ethan sat in the dimly lit kitchen of the mansion, sipping a cup of coffee. His thoughts swirled with questions. Why was Henry so interested in him? What did Grace really think of him? And most importantly, what would happen next? As he stared into the darkness outside the window, Ethan realized something. He wasn't just a bystander anymore. He was part of whatever story was unfolding here, whether he liked it or not. And deep down, he couldn't help but wonder, was this the beginning of something miraculous? Or was it the calm before the storm? For now, all he could do was wait and see. As the days turned into weeks, Henry's recovery continued to surprise everyone. He grew stronger each day, regaining more control over his body and speech. His mind, however, remained a puzzle. While he could hold conversations and remember basic facts about himself, his name, his wealth, his role as a businessman, he struggled with details. Names of friends, dates of important events, even the layout of his own mansion seemed lost to him. Yet, despite these gaps, Henry's demeanor was calm and thoughtful. He didn't appear frustrated by his memory loss. Instead, he seemed almost curious, as if he were rediscovering the world around him. Ethan noticed this change in Henry. The older man wasn't just recovering physically, he was evolving emotionally. He spoke with a gentleness that Ethan hadn't expected from someone so powerful. There was no arrogance or impatience in his tone, only quiet curiosity. And oddly enough, much of that curiosity was directed at Ethan. "Tell me more about your life," Henry said one afternoon as Ethan helped him walk across the room. "What do you dream about?" Ethan hesitated, caught off guard by the question. "I don't really have dreams," he admitted after a moment. "I just want to take care of my sister, make sure she has a good future." Henry nodded slowly, his brow furrowed as if deep in thought. "That's noble," he said. "But surely there's something else? Something you'd want for yourself?" Ethan shrugged. "I guess I'd like to travel someday. See places outside Seattle. But that's not important right now." "It should be," Henry replied firmly. "Everyone deserves to chase their own happiness." The comment lingered in Ethan's mind long after their conversation ended. It wasn't just the words themselves, it was the way Henry said them, with such conviction and sincerity. It made Ethan wonder if Henry saw something in him that he couldn't see in himself. Grace, meanwhile, grew increasingly uneasy. She visited less frequently now, but when she did, her eyes followed Ethan closely. She watched how Henry interacted with him, how they shared moments of laughter and quiet understanding. To Grace, it felt unnatural, a caregiver bonding too deeply with her father. One evening, after Ethan had left the room, Grace confronted Henry directly. "Why are you so interested in him?" she asked bluntly. "He's just an employee." Henry looked at her, his expression unreadable. "He's more than that," he said simply. "He's kind, honest. He cares about people, not because he has to, but because he wants to." Grace frowned, shaking her head. "You barely know him, Dad. How can you say things like that?" "I may not remember everything," Henry replied, his voice steady, "but I know what matters. And Ethan, he matters." Grace didn't respond. She couldn't argue with the certainty in her father's voice, but she also couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She decided to keep a closer eye on Ethan, determined to uncover any hidden motives. Despite Grace's suspicions, Ethan remained focused on his work. He continued helping Henry regain his strength, encouraging him to practice walking, talking, and performing daily tasks. They spent hours together, and during those times, Ethan began to notice something strange. Whenever Henry asked about his past, he grew agitated, clutching his temples as if fighting off a headache. But when they talked about Ethan's life, Henry relaxed, almost as if he were piecing together fragments of someone else's story. One day, while Ethan was organizing old photo albums provided by Grace, Henry spotted a picture of Ethan from years ago. It was a candid shot taken during a summer barbecue, showing Ethan laughing with his father. Henry stared at the image for a long time, his fingers tracing the edges of the photograph. "You look so familiar," he murmured, "like I've known you forever." Ethan froze, startled by the comment. "We've only met recently," he said carefully. "You were in a coma before that." Henry nodded, but his gaze remained fixed on the photo. "Still, there's something about you, something I can't explain." Ethan tried to brush it off as coincidence, but the remark stayed with him. Over the next few days, similar comments slipped from Henry's lips. Once, while discussing Ethan's childhood, Henry described a scene with eerie accuracy, a rainy afternoon when Ethan had played catch with his father. Another time, he mentioned Lily's habit of humming lullabies to herself, a detail Ethan had never shared with anyone. At first, Ethan dismissed these remarks as lucky guesses or fragments of stories he might have accidentally told Henry. But the accuracy of Henry's descriptions became impossible to ignore. It was as though Henry had access to memories that weren't his own. Confused and unsettled, Ethan decided to bring the matter to Dr. Bennett. The doctor listened intently as Ethan explained what was happening, his expression growing more serious with each word. "This is highly unusual," Dr. Bennett said finally. "It sounds like some form of memory transfer, but we'll need to run tests to confirm." Tests were scheduled immediately. Henry underwent a series of neurological exams designed to map his brain activity. The results shocked everyone. Embedded within Henry's neural patterns were traces of Ethan's brainwave activity, fragments of thoughts, emotions, and memories that clearly belonged to Ethan. Dr. Bennett called Ethan into his office to discuss the findings. "It appears that parts of your mind have somehow transferred into Mr. Dawson's consciousness," the doctor explained. "This is unprecedented. We've never seen anything like it." Ethan sat in stunned silence, struggling to process the information. "How is that even possible?" he asked finally. "We're not sure," Dr. Bennett admitted. "It could be related to the prolonged physical contact during his coma, the bathing, the feeding, the constant presence. Or it might be something deeper, something we don't fully understand yet." Ethan left the office feeling overwhelmed. He wandered back to Henry's room, unsure of what to say or how to act. When he entered, Henry looked up, sensing his distress. "What's wrong?" Henry asked, concern evident in his voice. Ethan hesitated before speaking. "They ran some tests on you," he said slowly. "They found pieces of my memories in your mind." Henry's eyes widened, but he didn't seem surprised. "I knew it," he whispered. "I felt it all along. Bits and pieces of your life, your thoughts. They feel like mine now." Ethan sank into a chair, his head spinning. How is this happening? Why? Henry shook his head. I don't know, but maybe it's not an accident. Maybe it's meant to be. Those words sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Meant to be? What did that even mean? Was this some kind of cosmic joke, or was there a purpose behind it? Over the following days, Ethan wrestled with his emotions. Part of him felt violated, as though his privacy had been invaded. But another part of him couldn't deny the connection. He shared with Henry. There was a strange intimacy in knowing that someone else carried fragments of your soul, your experiences, your identity. Grace, meanwhile, grew angrier with each passing day. When she learned about the test results, she confronted Ethan in the hallway, her face flushed with fury. You've done something to him, she accused, her voice rising. You've manipulated him somehow. That's not true. Ethan shot back, his patience wearing thin. I didn't ask for this to happen. None of us understand why it's happening. Grace glared at him, unconvinced. Stay away from him, she warned. If you hurt him, I swear I'll make sure you regret it. Her words stung, but Ethan refused to back down. He cared about Henry, and he wasn't going to abandon him, not now. Not when things were still so uncertain. That night, Ethan sat alone in the kitchen, staring into the darkness outside. The weight of everything pressed down on him, the strange bond with Henry, Grace's hostility, the unanswered questions swirling in his mind. For the first time since taking the job, he felt truly lost. And yet, amidst the confusion, a small spark of hope remained. Whatever was happening between him and Henry, it was extraordinary, miraculous even. Whether it was a curse or a blessing, Ethan didn't know. All he knew was that he couldn't turn away not until he understood what it all meant. The revelation about Henry's connection to Ethan's memories sent ripples through their lives. It was as though the ground beneath them had shifted, leaving both men uncertain of where they stood. For Henry, the discovery brought a mix of wonder and unease. He couldn't deny the strange familiarity he felt toward Ethan's past. It was as if those memories were his own. Yet at the same time, it unsettled him. How could someone else's life feel so vivid, so real, inside his mind? Ethan, on the other hand, struggled with a different kind of confusion. The idea that fragments of his identity now resided in another person felt invasive, almost like a violation. But deep down, there was also a flicker of curiosity. If Henry carried pieces of Ethan's soul, did that mean he understood Ethan better than anyone ever had? And what did that say about their bond? Grace Dawson's suspicions reached a boiling point. She saw the way her father looked at Ethan like he trusted him completely, and it infuriated her. To her, Ethan was an outsider, someone who didn't belong in their world. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was manipulating her. Father, using this bizarre connection for personal gain. One afternoon, Grace cornered Ethan in the library of the mansion. Her voice was low but sharp, dripping with accusation. You're taking advantage of him, she hissed. You think I don't see it? You're feeding him your stories, worming your way into his mind. Ethan clenched his fists, trying to stay calm. I'm not doing anything wrong, he said firmly. This isn't something I can control. None of us understand why it's happening. Don't lie to me, Grace snapped. You're using my father's condition to get close to him. What do you want? Money? Power? I don't want anything from him, Ethan replied, his voice rising despite his efforts to remain composed. All I've done is try to help him recover. That's all. Grace glared at him, her jaw tight. If you hurt him, I'll make sure you pay for it. Her words hung heavy in the air, but Ethan refused to back down. He cared about Henry too much to walk away, no matter how angry Grace became. Still, her anger weighed on him, adding another layer of stress to an already complicated situation. As days passed, Henry began experiencing vivid dreams. Each night, he drifted into sleep, only to be pulled into scenes from Ethan's childhood. He relived moments Ethan hadn't spoken about aloud, playing catch with his father under the golden glow of sunset, comforting Lily after a nightmare. Even small details, like the smell of rain on their porch or the sound of his mother's laughter echoing through the house. When Henry woke up, he often shared these dreams with Ethan. At first, Ethan listened skeptically, wondering if Henry was simply piecing together fragments of things he'd overheard. But the accuracy of the descriptions left him shaken. Henry spoke about places and events Ethan had never mentioned to anyone, let alone to Henry. "It's like I'm living your life," Henry admitted one morning, his voice tinged with awe. "I feel everything you felt, the joy, the pain, this longing. It's overwhelming." Ethan stared at him, unsure of how to respond. "Do you think it's because of the coma?" he asked hesitantly. "Maybe being unconscious for so long opened your mind somehow." Henry nodded slowly. "It's possible. Or maybe it's something else entirely. Something we can't explain." Their conversations grew deeper, more intimate. They talked about loss, regret, and hope. Henry confessed that he felt disconnected from his old life, as if the man he used to be was a stranger. In contrast, the glimpses he got of Ethan's world felt familiar, grounding him in ways he couldn't fully articulate. "You remind me of who I want to be," Henry said one evening as they sat together in the quiet of his room. "Kind, honest, selfless." Ethan shook his head, embarrassed by the praise. "I'm just doing my job." "No," Henry insisted. "You're more than that. You've shown me what truly matters. Maybe that's why our minds are connected, to teach us something." Ethan didn't know how to respond. He wanted to believe Henry's words, but the whole situation felt surreal. Was this some kind of cosmic lesson? Or was it simply a medical anomaly with no greater meaning? Dr. Bennett continued monitoring Henry closely, running more tests to understand the phenomenon. The results confirmed what they already knew. Ethan's brainwave patterns were intertwined with Henry's neural activity. What baffled the doctor was the depth of the connection. It wasn't just surface-level memories. It was emotions, instincts, and even flashes of personality traits that seemed to blend between them. "This goes beyond science," Dr. Bennett admitted during one of their meetings. "We're dealing with something metaphysical here, something extraordinary." Ethan nodded, though he still grappled with the implications. "What does it mean for us?" he asked. "Will it fade over time, or will it keep growing?" "We don't know," the doctor replied honestly. "But whatever happens, it's important to approach this with care. Both of you need support through this process." Support wasn't easy to come by, especially with Grace breathing down their necks. Her hostility escalated, culminating in a heated argument with Ethan in front of Henry. She accused him of exploiting her father's condition, her voice trembling with frustration. "You don't belong here," she shouted. "You're nothing but a hired hand." "That's enough, Grace," Henry interrupted, his tone firm. "Ethan has been nothing but kind to me. He's helped me more than you realize." Grace turned to her father, tears welling in her eyes. "He's using you, Dad. Can't you see that?" Henry's expression softened, but his resolve didn't waver. "I know what I feel," he said gently. "And right now, I trust Ethan more than anyone." The tension in the room was palpable. Grace stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Ethan stood frozen, unsure of what to say. He glanced at Henry, who gave him a reassuring smile. "Don't let her get to you," Henry said. "She's scared, that's all." Ethan nodded, though the encounter left him drained. He realized that staying in the mansion might not be sustainable, not with Grace determined to drive a wedge between him and Henry. But walking away felt impossible. He cared too much about Henry to abandon him now. That night, Ethan found himself sitting by the window in his small apartment above the garage. The stars twinkled faintly in the sky, offering little comfort. His mind raced with questions. Was he supposed to stay and face whatever came next? Or should he step back, giving Henry space to figure things out without interference? Before he could settle on an answer, a knock sounded at the door. Startled, Ethan opened it to find Henry standing there, leaning on a cane for support. His presence surprised Ethan. Henry rarely ventured outside his room without assistance. "I needed to talk to you," Henry said, his voice steady. Away from everyone else, Ethan stepped aside, inviting him in. They sat together in silence for a moment before Henry spoke again. "I've been thinking," he began, "about this connection between us, about what it means." Ethan waited, letting him continue. "It's not just about memories," Henry said. "It's about understanding. You've given me a second chance, a chance to see the world through your eyes, and I think I'm meant to use that." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, his brow furrowing. Henry hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I've spent most of my life chasing success, building wealth, protecting my legacy, but none of that matters now. Not compared to what I've learned from you." Ethan shook his head, confused. "I haven't taught you anything." "Yes, you have," Henry insisted. "You've shown me kindness, patience, love for your sister, for others. Those are the things that matter. And I want to honor that." Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. He wanted to argue, to tell Henry that he didn't owe him anything, but something stopped him. Deep down, he knew Henry was speaking from the heart. "I don't know what to say," Ethan admitted finally. "You don't have to say anything," Henry replied. "Just promise me one thing, that you won't give up on me, no matter what happens." Ethan looked into Henry's eyes and saw sincerity staring back at him. For the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he couldn't turn away, not when Henry needed him most. "I promise," Ethan said softly. As they sat together under the dim light of the apartment, the weight of the world seemed lighter. Neither of them had all the answers, but they shared something rare and profound, a bond that transcended logic, defied explanation, and hinted at something miraculous. The days that followed Henry and Ethan's late-night conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. Both men knew they were navigating uncharted territory, but the bond between them had grown too strong to ignore. Henry began to view Ethan not just as a caregiver or a source of memories, but as a guide, a person who had unknowingly reshaped his perspective on life. For Ethan, the connection was both a blessing and a burden. He couldn't deny the intimacy of sharing parts of himself with another person, yet he worried about what it meant for his own identity. Grace Dawson remained a constant storm cloud over their lives. Her anger hadn't subsided. If anything, it had intensified. She saw Ethan's presence as a threat to her father's recovery and her family's stability. Every interaction between Ethan and Henry fueled her suspicion, making her more determined to drive a wedge between them. Not one morning, Grace arrived at the mansion earlier than usual. She stormed into Henry's room without knocking, her face flushed with frustration. "Dad, we need to talk," she said sharply, her eyes darting toward Ethan, who stood nearby adjusting Henry's blankets. Henry sighed, sensing the tension in her voice. "What is it, Grace?" "It's him," Grace said, pointing accusingly at Ethan. "He's manipulating you. Don't you see? He's using this weird connection to make you trust him." Ethan stepped forward, his hands raised in defense. "That's not true," he said firmly. "I've never tried to manipulate anyone." "Then why are you still here?" Grace shot back. "You're not family. You don't belong in our lives." Before Ethan could respond, Henry interjected. "Grace, stop," he said, his tone firm but calm. "Ethan has done nothing wrong. In fact, he's been the one person who truly understands me right now. That's exactly my point." Grace exclaimed, "You're letting him get inside?" "Your head, literally." Henry shook his head, his expression softening. "It's not like that," he said. "This connection isn't something either of us chose. But it's real, and it's teaching me things I needed to learn." Grace looked at her father, tears welling in her eyes. "You're changing, Dad, and I don't know who you are anymore." Her words hung heavily in the air. Ethan felt a pang of guilt, knowing that his presence had disrupted their family dynamic. But Henry didn't falter. "Maybe that's a good thing," he replied gently. "Maybe I needed to change." Grace stared at him, her lips trembling. Without another word, she turned and left the room, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the mansion, leaving an uncomfortable silence in its wake. Ethan glanced at Henry, unsure of what to say. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Henry waved off the apology. "It's not your fault," he said. "Grace will come around eventually. Until then, we focus on what matters." Over the next few weeks, Ethan found himself caught in a delicate balancing act. On one hand, he continued helping Henry regain his strength and independence. They spent hours practicing physical therapy exercises, working on speech clarity, and discussing strategies for managing daily tasks. On the other hand, Ethan wrestled with the ethical implications of their connection. Was it fair for him to remain so deeply involved in Henry's life when it caused such friction with Grace? Dr. Bennett offered some guidance during one of their meetings. "This situation is unprecedented," the doctor admitted, "but I think the key is transparency. Both of you need to communicate openly about how this connection affects you." Ethan nodded, though he wasn't sure where to begin. How could? He explained the weight of carrying someone else's memories or having his own embedded in another person's mind. It was a burden he hadn't asked for, yet it felt impossible to escape. One evening, after a long day of work, Ethan decided to take a walk around the grounds of the mansion. The cool breeze carried the scent of pine trees, soothing his restless thoughts. As he wandered along the winding paths, he spotted Henry sitting on a bench overlooking the garden. His cane rested against the seat beside him, and his gaze was fixed on the horizon. "You shouldn't be out here alone," Ethan said as he approached. "What if you need help?" Henry smiled faintly. "I wanted some time to think," he replied, "and I figured you'd find me sooner or later." Ethan chuckled softly and sat down beside him. "Anything interesting on your mind?" Henry hesitated before speaking. "I've been thinking about responsibility," he said, "about what it means to carry someone else's memories and what it means to give them yours." Ethan frowned, unsure of where this was going. "I don't understand." "I feel like I owe you something," Henry explained. "You've given me pieces of your life, your hopes, your fears, your dreams, and I can't repay that with words." "Alone, you don't owe me anything," Ethan said quickly. "I didn't ask for this to happen." "But it did," Henry countered. "And now I have a choice. I can let this connection fade away, or I can use it to make a difference for both of us." Ethan leaned back, processing his words. "What are you saying?" Henry took a deep breath. "I want to help you," he said. "Not just because of what we share, but because you deserve it. You've sacrificed so much for your sister, for others. Let me give you a chance to build the life you've always wanted." Ethan blinked, stunned by the offer. "I can't accept charity," he said firmly. "Especially not from you." "It's not charity," Henry insisted. "It's gratitude, and maybe redemption." The word lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. Ethan realized that Henry wasn't just talking about helping him. He was trying to heal himself too. By supporting Ethan, Henry hoped to rewrite the narrative of his own life, to become someone worthy of the second chance he'd been given. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the garden in shades of orange and purple. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "Let me think about it," he said quietly. "This is a lot to process." Henry nodded, understanding the weight of his proposal. "Take all the time you need," he said. "But know that I mean every word." As they walked back to the mansion together, Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of him wanted to reject Henry's offer outright, to insist that he didn't need anyone's help. But another part of him recognized the sincerity in Henry's voice, the genuine desire to make amends. Maybe this was their opportunity to turn something extraordinary into something meaningful. Later that night, Ethan lay awake in his apartment, staring at the ceiling. His mind raced with possibilities. If he accepted Henry's offer, it could change everything, not just for him, but for Lily, too. She could finish high school without worrying about money. He could pursue opportunities he'd never dared to dream of. But accepting also meant acknowledging the strange bond between them, embracing the idea that their lives were intertwined in ways neither fully understood. Could he live with that? Could he trust Henry enough to let him into his future? As dawn broke over the hills, Ethan made his decision. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. Sometimes, miracles came disguised as challenges. And maybe, just maybe, this was one of those miracles. Months passed, and the connection between Ethan and Henry continued to evolve. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of frustration, confusion, and doubt, but both men remained committed to navigating the strange bond they shared. For Ethan, it became a lesson in trust. For Henry, it was a journey toward redemption. One crisp autumn morning, Ethan received a letter from Henry. It was handwritten, something unusual for a man who had spent most of his life dictating orders, rather than penning words himself. The note was simple but heartfelt. "Ethan, I'd like to meet you at the cafe downtown tomorrow afternoon. There's something important I need to discuss with you. Please come. Henry." Curiosity stirred within Ethan as he read the message. He hadn't seen much of Henry outside the mansion since his recovery began. The idea of meeting him in public felt strange yet intriguing. Whatever Henry wanted to discuss, it clearly mattered deeply to him. The next day, Ethan arrived at the cafe just as the sun hung low in the sky, casting warm golden light across the streets. He spotted Henry sitting at a table near the window, looking healthier and more at peace than ever before. His once frail frame had filled out, and his eyes sparkled with clarity. As Ethan approached, Henry smiled warmly, gesturing for him to sit. "You came," Henry said, his voice carrying a note of gratitude. "Of course," Ethan replied, taking a seat. "What's this about?" Henry hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I've been thinking a lot lately about us, about what we've been through. And I realized something. I owe you more than just words." Ethan frowned, unsure of where this was heading. "You don't owe me anything," he said firmly. "We've already talked about that." "Maybe not in the traditional sense," Henry admitted. "But I wouldn't be here without you, literally or figuratively. You gave me a second chance, and now I want to give you one too." Before Ethan could respond, Henry reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. He slid it across the table, his hands steady despite the weight of the moment. "This is for you and for Lily," he explained. "It's a trust fund, enough to cover her education and give you the freedom to pursue your dreams." Ethan stared at the envelope, his heart pounding. He opened his mouth to protest, but Henry held up a hand to stop him. "Hear me out," he said gently. "This isn't charity. It's repayment for everything you've done for me. You've shown me what truly matters in life: kindness, selflessness, love. This is my way of honoring that." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes as he struggled to process the gesture. "I don't know what to say," he admitted finally. "You don't have to say anything," Henry replied. "Just promise me one thing, that you'll use this opportunity to build the life you deserve." Ethan nodded slowly, overwhelmed by the generosity of the offer. He knew it would change everything, not just for him, but for Lily too. She could finish high school without worrying about money. He could explore opportunities he'd never imagined possible. But accepting the gift also meant acknowledging the depth of their connection. It meant trusting Henry completely, even though their bond was built on something neither fully understood. Could he do that? Could he let go of his doubts and embrace the miracle of their shared experience? As they sat together in the quiet cafe, Ethan realized the answer was yes. This wasn't just about money or gratitude. It was about hope. About believing that sometimes life offered second chances in unexpected ways. "I'll take it," Ethan said softly, his voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you." Henry smiled, relief washing over his face. "You deserve it," he said simply. "Both of you." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking about the future. Ethan shared his dreams of traveling, of seeing places beyond Seattle, of finding a purpose bigger than himself. Henry listened intently, offering advice and encouragement. For the first time in years, Ethan allowed himself to imagine a life free from the burdens of survival, a life filled with possibilities. Grace, however, remained skeptical. When she learned about the trust fund, her anger flared anew. She confronted Ethan later that week, her voice sharp with accusation. "How dare you take advantage of my father like that?" She demanded. "Do you think you can just waltz into our lives and walk away with his money?" "It's not like that," Ethan replied calmly. "Your father offered it willingly. He wanted to help." "He's confused," Grace snapped. "He doesn't know what he's doing." "That's not true," Ethan countered. "He's clearer than he's ever been. And if you really cared about him, you'd see that." Grace glared at him, her fists clenched. "Stay away from him," she warned. "If you hurt him again, I swear I'll make you regret it." Her words stung, but Ethan refused to back down. He knew he hadn't manipulated Henry. He'd simply accepted a gift given out of love and gratitude. If Grace couldn't understand that, then it wasn't his problem. In the weeks that followed, Ethan began making plans for the future. He enrolled Lily in a tutoring program to prepare her for college applications. He started researching travel destinations, imagining the adventures that awaited them. And he continued visiting Henry occasionally, ensuring that their bond remained strong despite the changes in their lives. For Henry, the decision to support Ethan brought a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He no longer defined himself by wealth or power. Instead, he found fulfillment in helping others. He reconnected with Grace slowly, rebuilding their fractured relationship through honest conversations and shared memories. Though their bond would never be the same as it once was, they began to find common ground. One evening, as Ethan packed his belongings to move into a small apartment closer to the city, Henry stopped by to say goodbye. They stood together in the driveway, the cool night air wrapping around them like a comforting embrace. "This isn't goodbye forever," Henry said, his voice steady. "We're connected in ways science can't explain. And maybe that's a good thing." Ethan smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. "Yeah," he agreed. "Maybe it is." As they shook hands, Ethan felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the opportunities ahead, but for the journey that had brought him here. Life had thrown him challenges, losses, and uncertainties, but it had also given him miracles. Miracles disguised as comas, connections, and second chances. Walking away from the mansion that night, Ethan knew one thing for certain. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, But for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face whatever came next. Because sometimes miracles weren't about grand gestures or magical transformations. Sometimes they were about finding hope in the unlikeliest of places and holding on to it with all your heart.